Hello and welcome to episode 6 of my sports and exercise science series. We're going to be following on from episode 5 by learning about 7 new topics. These include the actions of different muscle groups, the different types of contractions that muscles produce, the group action of muscles, type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, skeletal muscle structure, actin and myosin, and finally troponin and tropomyosin. In the previous episode, we touched on the major muscle groups of the body. I'm going to take 14 major muscle groups of the body and go through the Latin or Greek definition, location the muscle is found, the joint that the muscle moves, the muscle action that is produced, and an example of an exercise that would work the muscle or a real-life example of when you would use the muscle. First up, we have the pectoralis major, which is located here at the front of the chest. Pectoralis means relating to the chest, and major means larger. This means that there is not only one pectoralis muscle, as we have the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. The pectoralis major's muscle actions are flexion, adduction, and medial rotation of the arm at the glenohumeral joint, so it moves the shoulder joint. You would use the pectoralis major when bringing the arm forward and across the body, for example when applying deodorant to the opposite armpit, or to pull something down from above, such as a rope, to ring a bell. In the gym, a common movement to work your pectoralis major is the bench press. Next is the latissimus dorsi, located here at the back of the upper body. Latissimus means widest and dorsi or dorsi means of the back, so the latissimus dorsi is the widest muscle of the back. The latissimus dorsi's action is adduction and medial rotation, and extension of the arm at the glenohumeral joint. Therefore, it acts to move the shoulder joint. You would use your latissimus dorsi when climbing and in certain swimming strokes such as the front crawl, and even when you push on the arms of a chair to stand up. A classic gym movement that works the latissimus dorsi is a pull-up. Next, we have the deltoids, which are located here at the upper arm. The word deltoid is derived from the Greek word veltoides, meaning shaped like the green capital letter delta. The deltoid is composed of 3 parts consisting of the anterior, middle, and posterior fibers. The deltoid's muscle actions are major abduction of the arm. This is abduction beyond the first initial 15 degrees done by the supraspinatus. The anterior fibers assist in flexing the arm, and the posterior fibers assist in extending the arm. You would use the deltoid to reach for something in front of you, to the side, or behind your body. A common exercise for the deltoid would be a shoulder press. Next is the trapezius, located here at the back of the upper body. The word trapezius originates from the Greek trapezoides, meaning four-sided or trapezoidal, so you can see that the trapezius is named for its shape. The trapezius muscle is dissected into 3, the upper, middle, and lower fibers. The trapezius muscle is a powerful elevator of the scapula and rotates the scapula during abduction of the humerus above horizontal. The middle fibers help to retract the scapula and the lower fibers help to depress the scapula. If you was to paint a ceiling, for example, your upper and lower fibers would work together. In the gym, a common exercise for working your trapezius would be a bent over row or a shrug. Next, we have the biceps brachii, located here at the front of the arm. Bi means 2 and sep means head, so the bicep is a 2-headed muscle. The bicep acts as a powerful flexor of the forearm at the elbow joint and supinates the forearm. It has been described as the muscle that puts in the corkscrew and pulls out the cork of a bottle of wine. You would use the bicep when picking up an object or to bring food to your mouth, and of course in the gym when doing a bicep curl. Next is the tricep brachii, located here at the back of the arm. The Latin for triceps, you guessed it, tri means 3 and sep means head, so the triceps brachii is a 3-headed muscle of the arm. The triceps extend the forearm at the elbow joint, and the long head can also extend and adduct the arm at the shoulder joint. You would use the tricep when throwing a ball or pushing a door shut. In the gym, a common exercise you would use the tricep for is a tricep extension. Up next is the rectus abdominis, located here at the front of the abdomen. The word rectus in Latin means straight, and abdominis means of the belly or stomach. The rectus abdominis' actions are to flex the lumbar spine and pull the ribcage down. As we walk, the rectus abdominis stabilizes the pelvis and, of course, assists in posture. A classic gym exercise would be a sit-up or plank. The muscles that make up the erector spinae are located here and are deep muscles which help to extend the spine and help to maintain posture. The Latin meaning of the word erector spinae means erector of the spine. The erector spinae help to side flex and extend the vertebral column. You would use your erector spinal muscles when wanting to pick something up off the floor with a straight back, or alternatively in the gym, a back raise or a deadlift would work your erector spinals too. Next are the gluteal muscles. Glutes derives from the Greek gluteus, meaning buttock, and we have three primary glute muscles, including the gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus. Maximus meaning biggest in Latin, medius meaning middle, and minimus meaning smallest. The gluteus maximus actions as a powerful extensor at the hip joint and a lateral stabilizer of the hip and knee joints. It helps to laterally rotate and abduct the thigh, so in everyday life we use the gluteus maximus muscles to walk up the stairs and rise from a seated position. In the gym, a classic exercise is the squat. The gluteus medius abducts the femur at the hip joint, medially rotates the thigh, and holds the pelvis in a secure stance, preventing pelvic drop on the opposite side as we walk. The gluteus minimus also functions to abduct, medially rotate, and assists in flexion of the hip joint. The quadricep is located here at the front of the leg. There are four muscles that make up the quadriceps, and these include the vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, and rectus femoris. In Latin, quad means four, sep means head, rectus means straight, femoris means of the thigh, and vastus means vast. The locations can also be translated, lateralis meaning towards the side, and medialis meaning towards the midline. All four quadricep muscles extend the leg at the knee joint, however the rectus femoris also flexes the thigh at the hip joint. You would often see the quadriceps worked out in the gym on a leg extension machine, and in everyday life you would use the quadriceps when walking upstairs or cycling. The hamstrings are located at the back of the thigh, as shown here, and consist of three muscles: the semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. In Latin, semi means half, tendo means tendinous, and membranosus means membrane. Finally, I want you to think about what biceps femoris would mean, considering what you've learned already in this video. Bicep meaning two-headed, and femoris, of course, meaning of the thigh. The hamstrings act to flex the knee joint, semimembranosus and semitendinosus extend the thigh at the hip joint, medially rotate the thigh at the hip joint, and leg at the knee joint. Biceps femoris extends and laterally rotates the thigh at the hip joint and laterally rotates the leg at the knee joint. You use your hamstrings in the gym when doing the leg curl machine and in everyday life when kicking a ball, running, and jumping. The gastrocnemius is located at the back of the lower leg, as shown here. The name derives from Greek, gaster, meaning belly, and nemi, meaning leg. The gastrocnemius acts to plantarflex the foot and flexes the knee. The gastrocnemius is the main propelling force when we walk or run, and an example of its basic functional movement will be when we stand on our tiptoes. In the gym, you'll often see the calves worked out on the calf raise machine. Next, we have the soleus. The Latin meaning of solea is flatfish or sandal. Not the easiest to remember, right? How I remember this one is to think of the muscle loosely resembling the shape of a fish and thinking that it doesn't reach the sole of the foot, hence flatfish and sandal. The soleus is known as the skeletal muscle pump due to its responsibility for pumping venous blood back towards the heart from the periphery during upright posture. The soleus actions to plantarflex the foot and is in constant contraction as we stand to prevent the body from falling forward at the ankle joint. Most sports that require running and jumping will utilize the soleus muscle. Finally, we have the tibialis anterior located here at the front of the shin. Tibialis in Latin means relating to the shin, and anterior means at the front. So, the tibialis anterior is located at the front of the shin. The main function of the tibialis anterior is to dorsiflex the foot at the ankle joint. That is the action of pointing your foot towards yourself. It also helps to invert the foot and provides dynamic support of the medial arch of the foot. We use the tibialis anterior in everyday life to walk and run. The muscle helps to prevent the foot from slapping onto the ground after the heel strikes and lifts the foot clear of the ground as the leg swings forward. In the gym, if you used to walk or run uphill, you would be heavily using your tibialis anterior. Now we have looked at 14 major muscles of the body, let's now move on to the different types of muscular contractions these muscles produce. Strictly speaking, a muscle contraction is the tightening or shortening of a muscle. A muscle contraction is followed by muscle relaxation, which is when a contracted muscle returns back to its normal state. In sport and exercise, there are 3 different ways muscles can develop tension and act. These are known as concentric actions, eccentric actions, and isometric actions. So what are these actions? A concentric action is an action whereby a muscle shortens and develops tension. Let's take a bicep curl as an example. The concentric action would be the upwards movement phase of a bicep curl. In this case, the muscle develops tension to work against the force that gravity is exerting on the weight being lifted. Of course, the heavier the weight being lifted, the greater gravity's pull and the greater force the muscle must produce. Eccentric muscle actions are actions whereby muscle length increases and develops tension. Let's think of the bicep curl again. On the lowering phase of the exercise, when returning the weight back to the start position, you are in the eccentric phase of the exercise. This type of action occurs to control the force of gravity. Remember, you don't just drop the weight down during a bicep curl. You steadily return the weight under tension to control the safe movement of the elbow joint. Finally, we have isometric muscle actions. An isometric action is where muscles produce tension but do not change in length. We've all heard of the exercise the plank, right? You know when you do a plank that your muscles are working, but you're not moving and therefore your muscles aren't changing in length. The same applies for exercises such as a wall sit. Isometric contractions are common in the human body because they're needed to hold individual joints, allow us to stand up, maintain posture, and resist force. How does this differ to the group action of muscles? Muscles often work in pairs of groups. For example, the bicep flexes the elbow and the tricep extends it. This is known as an antagonistic muscle pair. The muscle working is called the prime mover or agonist, and the muscle relaxing is known as the antagonist. Another example would be the quadriceps and hamstrings. The prime mover is helped by other muscles called synergists. These muscles contract at the same time as the prime mover to hold the body in position so the prime mover can work smoothly. Muscles can perform one of 4 roles. Agonists. These muscles cause the movement to occur. They create the normal range of movement in a joint by contracting. Agonists are also referred to as prime movers since they are the muscles that are primarily responsible for generating the movement. Antagonists. These muscles act in opposition to the movement generated by agonists and are responsible for returning a limb back to its initial position. Synergists. These muscles perform or assist in performing the same set of joint motion as the agonists. Synergists are sometimes referred to as neutralizers because they help cancel out or neutralize extra range of motion from the agonists to make sure that the force generated works within the desired plane of motion. Fixators. These muscles provide the necessary support to assist in holding the rest of the body in place whilst the movement occurs. Fixators are sometimes called stabilizers. Moving on, every muscle consists of different fibers called slow twitch and fast twitch fibers. So what does this mean? Slow twitch muscle fibers, which are also known as type 1 muscle fibers, contract slowly and are fatigue resistant. These are the types of fibers that are suited to performing endurance tasks which involve contracting with low force over a long period of time. In order for slow twitch fibers to perform these tasks, they need to have good blood supply and be provided with oxygen. Type 1 fibers contain many blood vessels as well as red-coloured protein myoglobin, which enables them to attract oxygen into the muscles. Finally, slow twitch fibers gain energy for contraction from the breakdown of glucose and fats in the presence of oxygen. This means that they are aerobic and thus capable of prolonged contractions. Fast twitch muscle fibers, also known as type 2 muscle fibers, are split into 2 groups, which are type 2A and type 2B. Type 2A fibres are sometimes referred to as intermediate fibres. This is because they possess the characteristics that are intermediate between fast fibres and slow fibres. Type 2A fibres produce ATP relatively quickly and can produce high amounts of tension. They are oxidative because they produce ATP aerobically and possess high amounts of mitochondria, meaning they do not fatigue quickly. Type 2B fibres primarily use anaerobic glycolysis as their ATP source. They have a large diameter and possess high amounts of glycogen, which is used in glycolysis to generate ATP quickly to produce high levels of tension. Type 2B fibres produce rapid, forceful contractions to make quick and powerful movements. As type 2B fibres do not primarily use aerobic metabolism, they do not possess substantial amounts of mitochondria or myoglobin, and therefore these fibres fatigue quickly. So let's now recap. The difference between slow and fast twitch muscle fibres are that slow twitch fibres are red in colour, have good blood supply, and are slow to fatigue. They're used in endurance events such as cycling and running. Fast twitch fibres, however, are whitish in colour, have poorer blood supply, and fatigue quickly. They're used in speed and power movements such as Olympic lifting and sprinting. Finally, what influences the number of fast and slow twitch fibres in the body? How do you know what distribution you have? The number of slow and fast twitch fibres contained in the body varies greatly between individuals and is determined by a person's genetics. People who do well at endurance sports tend to have higher numbers of slow twitch fibres, whereas people who do better at sprint events tend to have higher numbers of fast twitch fibres. Both the slow and fast twitch fibres can be influenced by training. It is possible through sprint training to improve the power generated by slow twitch fibres, and through endurance training, it is possible to increase the endurance level of fast twitch fibres. Let's now move on to the structure of muscles. If you was to take a cross-section of a single muscle, you would find that it's covered in a protective sheath or layer called the epimysium. The epimysium helps to protect the muscle from friction against other muscles and bones. Each muscle is made up of a number of muscle fibres called fasciculi and are contained within another connective tissue called the perimysium. Each muscle fibre contains anywhere from 10 to 100 individual fibres. Large muscles like the quadriceps would have a large number of fibres within each bundle. Each muscle fibre is covered in a fibrous connective layer of tissues called the endomysium, which insulates each fibre. Beneath the endomysium is the sarcolemma, which is the muscle fibre's cell membrane, and beneath that is the sarcoplasm, which contains glycogen, fats, and mitochondria. Each muscle fibre itself contains cylindrical organelles known as myofibrils, and each muscle or fibre contains hundreds or thousands of myofibrils, which themselves are bundles of proteins called actin and myosin. These run the length of the muscle fibre and are vital in muscle contraction, as well as the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which surround the myofibril. Each myofibril can be broken down into functional repeating segments called sarcomeres. Sarcomeres are highly stereotyped and repeated throughout muscle cells, and the proteins within them can change in length, which causes the overall length of the muscle to change. An individual sarcomere contains many parallel thin actin and thick myosin filaments. The interaction of myosin and actin proteins is at the core of our current understanding of sarcomere shortening. How does this shortening happen? Well, it has something to do with the sliding interaction between actin and myosin, and this is where the sliding filament theory comes in. In 1954, scientists published two groundbreaking papers describing the molecular basis of muscle contraction. These papers described the position of myosin and actin filaments at various stages of contraction in muscle fibres and proposed how this interaction produced contractile force. High-resolution microscopy observed changes in the sarcomeres as muscle tissue shortened. They observed that one zone of the repeated sarcomere arrangement, the A band, remained relatively constant in length during contraction. The A band contains thick filaments of myosin, which suggested that the myosin filaments remained central and constant in length, while other regions of the sarcomere shortened. The investigators noted that the I band, rich in thinner filaments of actin, changed its length along with the sarcomere. These observations led them to propose the sliding filament theory, which states that the sliding of actin past myosin generates muscle tension. Because actin is tethered to structures located at the lateral ends of each sarcomere, called Z discs or Z bands, any shortening of the actin filament length would result in a shortening of the sarcomere and thus the muscle. This theory has remained impressively intact. The last topic we're going to cover in this video is troponin and tropomyosin. The binding of actin and myosin is dependent on the actions of two proteins, troponin and tropomyosin. Troponin is the protein that makes up the myosin binding site on the actin. It is like a hollow cavity, but when a muscle is relaxed, its entrance is blocked by a second protein, tropomyosin, which prevents actin and myosin from binding. A nervous impulse, however, will cause calcium ions to be released into the sarcomere, and the calcium ions act to push tropomyosin out of the binding site and thus activates the binding site. This is a really important process because it allows the actin and myosin to bind. The myosin then acts by pulling the two ends of the actin together and the muscle contracts. That concludes the 6th episode of my Sports and Exercise Science series. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and don't forget to like and subscribe for more free and educational content. You've been watching UK Fitness Hub, I've been Travistarrant, and I'll see you in the next episode where we begin study on neuromuscular physiology.